How do we integrate the vision and the values linked to the de-bias project within the wider framework of European cultural policies, and namely of the European Commission policy indications? Well, in order to do that, we have to acknowledge that there has been in Europe in the last decades a quite radical change of vision, which has been supported on the one hand by documents, official documents produced by different organizations and different institutions, such as declarations and charters, and we will see some of them in a few minutes, and on the other hand by an evolution, a change, a continuous change of European cultural policies. This change of vision is strictly connected to another big change, which is a change of paradigm in terms of how we do see culture and cultural heritage. In the past, cultural heritage, both intended as tangible and intangible heritage, has been seen as something static and binary, based on opposites and on juxtapositions. What do I mean? To make an example, most of European museums' collections have been created exactly basing the choice of the object to be exposed and how to expose the objects themselves on the basis of this idea of opposites, of contrast between mainly us, Europeans, and others, the rest of the world, or between objects and contexts which were geographically closer to us and those which were considered too far away, too distant, again in a vision of otherness. Nowadays, culture and cultural heritage as intended as something processual. Its values are processual, meaning that they change according to the change of time, to the change of society, and they are not at all intended to be binary based on opposites, but on the contrary, to be plural. Let's now have a look at the documents that I mentioned before that are one of the two pillars which supported this change of vision and of paradigm. I will mention just three of them, but of course there are quite many which are interesting to this respect. Let's start with the Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration of Human Rights, published in 1947, contains an article, Article 27, which states that everybody has the right to participate freely in the cultural life of the community. And the adverb freely does not mean for free, but means freely not only in economic terms, but mainly in cultural terms. Therefore, it opens up quite a big window on the topic of access and participation. The second document is the Faro Convention. The Faro Convention, published by the Council of Europe in 2005, is really a very important and paradigmatic document because it states that the value associated to cultural heritage is not only the value per se, the value stated by the experts, by the community of experts, but it's also the value which is attributed to cultural heritage by local communities. It is also a very interesting document because beyond the right of the communities to state and underline different kind of values, different voices, different perspectives, it also states the need for local communities to take care of their own cultural heritage. The third document is the European Agenda for Culture, published by the Commission in 2018, which states, among other important dimensions, such as the economic dimension and the political dimension of culture and cultural heritage, it states the importance of the social dimension, underlying the fact that culture and cultural heritage can foster a new vision of Europe, new opportunities for all European citizens to take part in cultural activities and to promote this sense of identity as European citizens. Having seen these three documents, we can now talk about the policy models, because the evolution of the policy models was, it happened, let's say, contextually with the evolution and the promotion of these documents that I just mentioned. The first model is the excellence model. It is the starting point of all the other models. It is the one stemming from the idea that of a dominant elite which sort of hands down culture to other members of society, following a very vertical path of transmission of knowledge. Obviously, participation is very limited in this model, but we know that the model is still currently applied. The second model that we are describing in this session is the access development model, which has been developed in Europe during the 50s and the 60s, and has a very strong attention to the concept of democratization of culture. It is a model which aims at extending participation and access to culture universally, recognizing as valid the values promoted by cultural heritage institutions for very different groups of society. Today, access development in European countries is strongly embedded in cultural institutions' policies, but at the same time, it still presents one of the main weaknesses that it had since the very beginning of its development, which is its unidirectional nature and sort of a missionary impulse, which is at the basis of the idea that cultural institutions can provide access to a variety of groups within society. The third model has been developed in Europe during the 80s and mainly during the 90s, and is the so-called socio-economic development model. It is based on the assumptions that culture and cultural heritage can foster economic growth and at the same time social growth, especially by intervening in cultural regeneration processes. In fact, it is a model that can be seen, for example, in the European program of the European Capital of Culture, which is strongly based on this idea that economic investments can foster social, economic, and cultural regeneration and growth. It is, let's say, a model which has its most eye-catching example in the use of culture and the arts in urban regeneration processes, as I said, but this is also its main limit, since very often in this model, the most important aspects are not related to culture or cultural heritage, but are related to social and economic objectives. Therefore, culture is used as an instrumental tool to achieve other objectives and other aims. Furthermore, this model is still very much embedded into the idea of a capitalistic society, which does not take into account all the current and contemporary movements, such as the degrowth movement, but it's still very much based on competition, on the idea of competition, which, as we all know, is deeply rooted in the capitalistic model. The fourth model that I'm going to describe now is the model called cultural inclusion or democracy model. Here, the emphasis is placed on the engagement of individuals and communities, not only as audience, but as actors and stakeholders, active stakeholders and creators of culture. But not just creators of culture in general terms, but also creators of new meanings, of new visions, of new points of view, as stated in the Faro Convention. We can say that this model is stemming from the Faro Convention in a way. It's been developing itself during the same years of the publication of the Faro Convention, which was in 2005, and it is a model very strongly related on the idea of legitimizing people to express, as I said, new visions, new ideas, new paradigms connected to cultural heritage, and to attribute new values to these heritage, tangible or intangible. We have to remember that we are talking of cultural heritage at large, as a body which includes both tangible and intangible assets. Obviously, this model strictly links itself with the idea, the philosophy, which is at the basis of the de-bias project, meaning that this model embodied, in a way, some of the principles that have been stated by the de-bias project. A new vision, a new understanding, a new knowledge about the words, in the case of de-bias, which describe cultural heritage collections, which is based on the idea that local communities, or let's say communities which are deeply rooted in a specific kind of heritage, can detect biased terms, can explore these terms and propose new interpretations of these terms and of the description of the collections in a broader sense, because they are legitimized to do that, because they are the main stakeholders of their own cultural heritage. Of course, in this model, it is very, very important to train or to transfer, let's say, competence and knowledge to the people who work in cultural institutions, because a process like that cannot happen if the institutions are not, first of all, aware of the need to legitimize people and communities, and second, if they do not have the tools to start these processes. Training and capacity building is therefore a very important aspect to ensure that this model can be adopted, and de-bias is working very hard on this issue of the capacity building of cultural professionals, because otherwise the model doesn't stand. The two things, the legitimization of local communities, the possibility for them to create new meanings, new visions, new points of view, has to be paired by a very strong capacity building process, transfer of knowledge and competence process for the people who work within cultural institutions.